I'd learned to look away from blood years ago. It was a survival skill in the ER. See the wound, not the person. See the mechanics of damage, not the story behind it. But when he walked through those double doors at 2 in the morning, alone and bleeding through a white shirt that probably cost more than my car, I couldn't look away. The waiting room was chaos. A drunk teenager with a split lip, an elderly woman clutching her chest, a mother with a screaming toddler. And then him, cutting through all of it like a knife through water, moving with the kind of certainty that comes from never having to ask permission for anything. His eyes found mine across the fluorescent-lit space. Dark, calculating, dangerous. I should have called security. I should have followed protocol. I should have done 100 things that would have kept my life exactly as it was. Small, safe, predictable. But there was something in the way he looked at me. Not pleading, not commanding, just certain. Like he already knew what I would do before I did. I made the worst decision of my life. You will feel so many emotions in this mysterious love story I'm about to tell. Please support us by clicking subscribe to the channel. I didn't call security. I didn't ask questions. I just led him through the maze of hallways to the empty bay in the back, the one we used for overflow, for patients we wanted to keep quiet and separate. I locked the door behind us. "You're not on the roster tonight," he said. Not a question. His voice was smooth, educated, with just a trace of something else underneath. Something old world and dangerous. "Night shift," I said, my hands already moving to assess the damage. "Short-staffed." "How did you know?" He didn't answer. Just watched me with those dark eyes as I cut away his shirt, revealing the wound between his ribs. Clean. Precise. Made by someone who knew exactly where to put a knife to cause maximum pain without hitting anything vital. My hands shook as I prepped the sutures. I told myself it was just adrenaline, just the normal response to breaking every rule I'd sworn to uphold. But it wasn't. It was him. The way he breathed. Steady, controlled, like pain was just another thing to manage. The way he smelled. Expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Gun oil. Maybe. Smoke. "You're good at this," he said, watching me work. "I'm a doctor. It's my job." "No," he said quietly. "You're good at not asking questions. That's different." I didn't respond. I focused on the needle, the thread, the familiar rhythm of closing flesh. But I couldn't ignore the tattoos. The three-headed serpent coiling up his forearm, each head breathing a different element: fire, water, earth. The crown of thorns circling his wrist like a brand. I'd seen gang tattoos before. Prison ink, street markers. This was something else, something older and more organized. This was money. This was power. This was the kind of danger that didn't announce itself. "What's your name?" he asked as I tied off the last suture. I hesitated. Giving him my name felt like signing a contract I hadn't read, like opening a door I could never close. "Clara," I whispered. He smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly, like he'd just won something I didn't know we were playing for. "Clara," he repeated, testing the syllables. Italian, Portuguese, my grandmother. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman who makes dangerous choices. I stepped back, stripping off my gloves. "You should go to a real hospital. Get a CT scan. Make sure there's no internal bleeding." "There isn't." "You can't know that." "I know my body, Dr. Clara. I know what kills you and what just hurts." He stood slowly, buttoning his ruined shirt like we'd just had coffee. Not like I'd just stitched up a knife wound that should have come with a police report. He moved like a man who'd been injured before. Like a man who knew how to compartmentalize pain. "I won't forget this," he said, pulling on his jacket. "I don't want your gratitude." "Good," he said. "Because what I'm offering is a debt, and I always pay my debts." Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked streets through the emergency exit, leaving only blood-stained gauze and the feeling that I'd just stepped off a cliff I couldn't see the bottom of. I cleaned the bay, disposed of the evidence, scrubbed my hands until they were red. Then I went back to work, sutured the teenager's lip, monitored the woman's heart rate, gave the toddler a lollipop. I did my job. I did what I was trained to do. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. 3 days passed. 3 days of jumping at every siren, checking over my shoulder, waiting for police or worse. I told myself it was over. That dangerous men like him had more important things to remember than one tired doctor who happened to be working late. I was wrong. When I came home from my shift on Thursday night, exhausted and thinking about nothing but sleep, there was a black limousine parked outside my building. Not just parked, positioned. Like it had been waiting. Like it knew exactly when I'd arrive. The back door opened, and he stepped out. Marco Vitelli. I'd looked him up. Of course I'd looked him up. 2 hours on Google had told me everything I needed to know and nothing I wanted to believe. Suspected ties to organized crime, 3 arrests, 0 convictions, a business empire that somehow touched everything, real estate, restaurants, construction, shipping, the kind of legitimate success that only comes from very illegitimate foundations. He leaned against the car like he owned the street, like he owned the whole neighborhood. Maybe he did. Dr. Clara, he said quietly, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I helped you. You left. It's over. Get in the car. No. He stepped closer. Not threatening, not aggressive, just certain. The way he'd been certain in the ER that I would help him. The man who put that knife in me knows you patched me up, he said. Security footage. He's got friends in the hospital, Clara, and he's very interested in having a conversation with you about loyalty and discretion. My keys froze in my hand. The night air suddenly felt colder. What does he want? Marco's dark eyes held mine. To send me a message. You're the message, Clara. So you can either get in the car and let me keep you alive, or you can go upstairs to your apartment and hope he's feeling merciful. He stepped back, giving me space, giving me a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I take care of what's mine, he said quietly. I'm not yours. His smile was sad, almost gentle. You became mine the moment you chose not to turn me in. I looked up at my building, 3rd floor, corner window, the apartment I'd saved for 3 years to afford, my safe space, my fresh start, the life I'd built from nothing after I'd burned the old one down. And I knew that the moment I'd locked that door in the ER, the moment I'd ignored protocol and chosen compassion over rules, I'd signed that contract after all. I got in the car. The leather seats smelled like money and secrets. I sat rigid, hands folded in my lap like a child being driven to the principal's office, watching Boston blur past through tinted windows. Marco sat across from me, relaxed, checking his phone with the casual efficiency of a man for whom crisis management was just another Tuesday. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted. That's not an answer. He looked up, and something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or respect. You're direct. I like that. You're evasive. I don't. He smiled then. A real smile that transformed his face from dangerous to almost human. My office. Downtown. 24-hour security, surveillance on every entrance, and the best espresso in the city. You'll be safe there while we figure this out. Safe. The word felt foreign. I hadn't felt safe in years. Not since David. Not since I'd learned that the people who promise protection are often the ones you need protecting from. But here I was, trusting a man I'd known for 3 days. A man whose business empire was built on violence and intimidation and things I didn't want to name. The building was glass and steel, anonymous and expensive. We rode an elevator to the top floor in silence. When the doors opened, I stepped into a space that looked more like a luxury apartment than an office. Dark wood, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Marco poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter without asking if I wanted one. I don't drink on work nights, I said. It's 4 a.m. Your shift ended 2 hours ago. Drink? I took the glass. Drank. Felt the burn spread through my chest, warming places that had been cold with fear. Tell me what you know, I said. Marco settled into a chair across from me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw him as something other than perfectly controlled. There was tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes. The man who stabbed me is named Luca Rossi. Low-level enforcer, high-level ambition. He thought taking me out would earn him a promotion in the Calabrese family. The Calabrese family? Our competitors. They've been trying to muscle into our territory for the past year. Luca was supposed to kill me. He failed. But the hospital security footage shows you treating me, shows me leaving alive. I set down my glass with shaking hands. So now I'm a witness. No, Marco said quietly. Now you're leverage. You're the person who kept me alive, which makes you valuable to them. They can use you to get to me, or they can eliminate you to send a message about what happens to people who help their enemies. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. I stood, walked to the windows, pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Below, the city sprawled in the pre-dawn darkness. Thousands of people sleeping peacefully, unaware that there were men who traded in violence like other people traded stocks. I need to go to the police, I said. And tell them what? That you treated an undocumented patient in violation of hospital protocol. That you didn't report a stabbing. That you're now being threatened by organized crime figures whose names you don't know and whose crimes you can't prove. I turned. There has to be something. There is, he interrupted. Me. I can protect you. I have the resources, the manpower, the intelligence network. But you have to trust me, Clara. And you have to do exactly what I say. I don't even know you. No, he agreed. But you saved my life. That means something in my world. It means I owe you. And I always pay my debts. There it was again. That word, debt. Like I'd entered into some ancient contract governed by rules I didn't understand. What does protection look like? I asked. 24-hour security, a driver, a man stationed outside your apartment, and another at the hospital. We monitor your phone, your movements, anyone who gets close to you. My stomach turned. That's not protection. That's prison. It's survival, he said flatly. And it's temporary. Once we neutralize the threat, once Luca and the Calabrese family understand that you're off limits, you go back to your life. When will that be? He didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. I thought about my apartment, small but mine, earned through double shifts and student loans. I thought about my job, the only thing I'd ever been good at, the only identity I had left after I'd shed all the others. I thought about Sophie, my little sister, safe in Providence, unaware that her big sister had just walked into a war zone. I need to call someone, I said. No calls, not yet. They could be monitoring. I need to call my sister, I said more firmly. Or I walk out that door right now and take my chances. Marco studied me for a long moment. Then he handed me a phone. Not mine. A burner. Untraceable. 2 minutes. Don't tell her where you are. Don't tell her anything specific, Sophie answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. Hello? Sophie, it's me. Clara? It's 4 a.m. Are you okay? No, I wasn't okay. I was sitting in a mobster's office drinking scotch and discussing my murder like it was a scheduling conflict. I'm fine, I lied. I just wanted to hear your voice. Are you good? Work okay? Yeah, same grind. Tips are decent this week. Why are you being weird? I'm not being weird. I just miss you. We literally talked 3 days ago. Marco was watching me, his expression unreadable. I could see the clock on the wall ticking down my 2 minutes. I love you, Soph. Be careful, okay? Lock your doors. Don't talk to strangers. Clara, you're freaking me out. What's going on? Nothing. I closed my eyes, willing my voice to steady. I just wanted to make sure you're safe. After I hung up, the silence in the office was deafening. Marco took the phone back, powered it down, removed the battery with practiced efficiency. She's in Providence? He asked. Yes. I'll have someone keep an eye on her. Discreetly. You will not, I said sharply. You will leave my sister out of this. Clara, if they know about you, they know about her. They've already done the research. They know every connection you have, every person you care about. That's how this works. They find your weaknesses and they exploit them. The words hit me like a physical blow. Sophie, my baby sister, who'd already lived through one nightmare when we were kids, who'd watched our mother drink herself to death and our father disappear. I'd sworn to protect her. I'd built a new life specifically so I could be the stable one, the reliable one, the sister she could count on. And now I'd brought danger to her door. I need air, I said. You can't leave. I need air or I'm going to scream, and I don't think you want me screaming in your office at 4 a.m. He stood, walked to a door I hadn't noticed, and opened it. A terrace, small, private, high enough that the wind cut sharp and cold. I stepped outside and gripped the railing, gulping in the freezing air. Behind me, I heard Marco's footsteps, quiet and careful. "My father died when I was 12, he said suddenly. "Shot in our kitchen while my mother made dinner. I was upstairs doing homework. I heard the gunshots and thought they were fireworks. I didn't turn around, didn't know what to say. I spent the next 6 years learning how to make sure it never happened again, learning how to be the man who controls the violence instead of the man who falls victim to it. I'm not a good person, Clara. I've done things that would make you sick, but I'm very good at keeping people alive. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Not just them. Me. I'm offering you protection, but it comes with a cost. The cost is freedom. The cost is control. The cost is living in my world until yours is safe again." I turned to face him. His expression was open in a way it hadn't been before. Vulnerable, almost. "I take care of what's mine," he said again. "But Clara, you have to let me." The wind whipped my hair across my face. Below, the city was starting to wake. Early risers heading to work, delivery trucks making their rounds, the eternal machinery of life continuing regardless of whether mine was falling apart. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." The next week was suffocating. A black SUV followed me to work. A man in a suit, introduced only as Paul, waited in the hospital cafeteria during my shifts, reading newspapers and drinking terrible coffee. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from unknown numbers. "All clear. Picking you up at 7. Don't take the subway." I felt like a prisoner in my own life, protected by a man whose protection felt more like possession. My coworkers noticed. Dr. Reeves, the attending, pulled me aside on day 3. "Everything okay, Silva? You seem distracted." "Just tired. Picked up extra shifts." "You sure? Because there's a guy in the cafeteria who's been here every day this week, and he keeps watching you. He's a friend. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. None of it was fine. I was living a double life. Dr. Clara Silva by day, treating patients and pretending everything was normal, and something else by night, something I didn't have a name for. The woman Marco Vitelli had claimed as his debt, his responsibility, his to protect. On the 7th day, something changed. I came home from my shift exhausted, looking forward to the 30 minutes of privacy I had before Paul knocked on my door to check the perimeter. But when I reached my apartment building, something felt wrong. The usual doorman wasn't at his post. The lobby was too quiet. I should have called Paul. Should have turned around and walked straight back to the hospital. But I was tired of being afraid, tired of living by someone else's rules. I took the stairs to the 3rd floor, approached my door carefully, and found a photograph slipped underneath. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was me, walking to work that morning, captured from across the street, the angle perfectly positioned to show my face, my root, my vulnerability. Someone had drawn a red X across my face with what looked like marker. But it could have been blood. On the back, written in neat script, "Your bodyguard can't be everywhere, Dr. Silva. We're patient. We can wait." I don't remember calling the number Marco had given me. Don't remember the words I said. But he was there in minutes, his face dark with fury as he studied the photograph, turning it over in his hands like it could reveal secrets through touch alone. "Pack a bag," he said, his voice tight and controlled. "I'm not running." I started. "You're not running. You're relocating. There's a difference. I didn't ask for this." My voice cracked, all the fear and exhaustion finally breaking through. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to do my job and go home and live my stupid, boring life. And now there are men watching me, threatening me, turning me into some kind of pawn in a game I don't understand. "Clara." Marco reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't tell me it's going to be okay. Don't make promises you can't keep." He froze, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain, lost. "You're right," he said quietly. "You didn't ask for this. You got pulled into my world because you were compassionate, because you saw someone bleeding and your first instinct was to help, not to question. That's who you are, and I'm sorry that who you are made you a target. The apology surprised me, disarmed me. But I can't change what's happened," he continued. "I can only control what happens next. And what happens next is that you come with me somewhere safer, somewhere they can't find you, somewhere I can figure out how to end this without anyone else getting hurt. How long? I don't know. Marco? I don't know, he said more firmly. But I swear to you, Clara, I will fix this. I will find whoever sent this, and I will make sure they understand that you are untouchable. That you were always untouchable. I looked at the photograph in his hands, at my own face marked for death. Okay, I whispered. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. I packed a bag, clothes, toiletries, my grandmother's rosary that I hadn't prayed with in years but couldn't leave behind. As I moved through my apartment, touching things I'd bought and arranged and made into a home, I felt something breaking inside me. This life I'd built so carefully, brick by brick, was crumbling, and I couldn't stop it. Marco waited by the door, patient and watchful. When I was ready, he took my bag without comment and led me down the back stairs to a car I didn't recognize. We drove in silence through the early evening traffic, leaving the city behind. I watched Boston disappear in the side mirror. The skyline, the harbor, the familiar streets that had become mine over 5 years of early mornings and late nights. Can I ask you something? I said finally. Yes. That night in the ER. Did you know? Did you know what would happen to me if I helped you? Marco's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The silence stretched. No, he said finally. I knew helping me was dangerous. I knew it broke rules. But I didn't know Luca would use hospital surveillance. I didn't know he'd make you a target. He glanced at me. If I had known, I would have walked back out that door and bled to death in an alley rather than put you at risk. You don't know that. Yes, he said. I do. We drove for another hour, leaving the highway for back roads, civilization for something wilder. Finally, we pulled up to a house. Not a mansion, not a compound, just a house. Isolated. Surrounded by trees, the kind of place where you could scream and no one would hear you. The thought sent ice through my veins. Marco must have seen it in my face because he said quietly, "You're safe here, Clara. This is my place, not business, not family, mine. No one knows about it except 2 people I'd trust with my life. And now you?" He came around and opened my door like we were on a date, not fleeing a death threat. I stepped out into the cool evening air, smelling pine and earth and the faint promise of rain. "Come on," he said. "I'll show you inside." The house was simple but beautiful. Wood floors, exposed beams, furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. There were books on the shelves, photographs on the walls, a guitar in the corner. "You play?" I asked, nodding toward it. "Used to. When I was younger. Before. He showed me to a bedroom, clean, comfortable, with windows that looked out onto forest. "You'll stay here. Door locks from the inside. Bathrooms through there. Kitchens downstairs. Make yourself at home. Where will you be?" "Next door. If you need anything, just knock." I set down my bag and turned to face him. We stood there in the doorway, closer than we'd been since that night in the ER, and I realized with sudden clarity that I was alone with a man I barely knew, a man who killed people for a living, a man who just isolated me from everything familiar. And I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of everything else, but not him. "Thank you," I said, "for not lying to me, for not pretending this is anything other than what it is." "What is it?" he asked. "Survival." His expression softened. "Get some rest, Dr. Silva. Tomorrow we start fighting back." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. I listened to his footsteps retreat down the hall, heard a door open and close. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the darkening forest, at the unknown shapes moving between trees, at the night descending. And that's when I saw it, hanging from a branch directly across from my window, a photograph. The same photograph, me with the red X across my face, except this one was recent. Taken today, taken after Marco had said this place was secret, after he'd promised I was safe. Someone had followed us here. Someone wanted me to know they could reach me anywhere. I didn't scream, didn't panic, just walked calmly to Marco's door and knocked. When he opened it, he must have seen something in my face because his expression shifted instantly from concern to cold fury. "What happened?" I stepped aside, pointed to the window. to the photograph swaying gently in the breeze. Marco moved past me, looked, and went very, very still. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call, his voice low and lethal. "We have a problem," he said. "Someone just sent a message." A pause. Then, "No. They found the safe house." Another pause. His eyes met mine across the room, and I saw something there I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For me. "Understood," he said, and hung up. "Clara," he said carefully, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. We're not safe here anymore. We need to move. Now." "Where?" "I don't know yet, but we're about to find out how deep this goes." He disappeared into his room for 30 seconds and emerged with a gun, a phone, and a grim expression. "Let's go," he started, and then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went white. "What?" I asked. "What is it?" He turned the phone toward me. It was a photograph. Sophie, my little sister Sophie, walking to her car in Providence, coffee cup in hand, completely unaware that someone was photographing her from across the parking lot. Below the image, a text message. "They know about your sister, Clara, and they just sent proof they've been watching her too." I hadn't spoken to Sophie in 2 years. Not really spoken. Not the way sisters should. We'd exchanged texts on birthdays, superficial updates about jobs and weather, the kind of communication that fills space without saying anything real. I'd told myself it was for her protection, that the less she knew about my life, the safer she'd be from the wreckage I'd left behind when I ran from David. But sitting in Marco's car at midnight, staring at that photograph of her laughing with her coffee cup, completely unaware that monsters were circling, I realized the truth. I'd abandoned her. Again, how fast can your people get to her? My voice sounded strange. Hollow. Marco was already on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian to someone whose responses I couldn't hear. 20 minutes. Maybe less. That's too long. It's what we have. I watched the dark trees blur past the window as Marco drove with controlled urgency, his jaw tight, one hand on the wheel, and the other gripping his phone like a weapon. We'd left the safe house within minutes, abandoning the illusion of security for the reality of pursuit. "Tell me about your sister," he said suddenly. "Why?" "Because I need to know who I'm protecting. Because my people need to know what to look for, how to approach her without scaring her more than necessary." He glanced at me. "Because you're terrified. And talking might help." He was right. I was terrified. More terrified than I'd been when I saw my own face marked for death, because at least then the danger was mine to face. This was Sophie. Sophie who'd held my hand through our mother's funeral. Sophie who'd believed me when I said I was leaving for medical school, not because I was running from a man who'd fractured my ribs. "She's 23, I said quietly. "Works 2 jobs, waitressing and bartending. She's saving for nursing school. She's stubborn and funny, and she doesn't deserve this. Neither do you." I made choices that led me here. Sophie didn't choose anything except to be related to me. Marco's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and some of the tension left his shoulders. "Good. Stay with her. Don't let her out of your sight." He hung up and looked at me. "My people found her. She's safe. They're bringing her to a location I own in Providence. A restaurant, closed for renovations. Neutral ground. We can meet her there. She's going to be terrified." I started. "She's going to be alive," Marco interrupted. "That's what matters right now." We drove in silence for another hour, leaving Massachusetts for Rhode Island, civilization giving way to industrial waterfronts and empty streets. Finally, Marco pulled into an alley behind a building with dark windows and a faded sign that read, "Marcello's." Inside, the restaurant was gutted, tables stacked, floors covered in drop cloths, the smell of fresh paint and abandonment. And in the center of it all, surrounded by 2 men in dark suits, was Sophie. She saw me and her face crumpled with relief and confusion and anger all at once. "Clara? What the hell is going on?" I ran to her, pulled her into my arms, felt her shaking against me. She was taller than I remembered. Thinner. When had I last actually seen her in person? 6 months? A year? "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." These men grabbed me in the parking lot. They said I was in danger. They wouldn't let me call you. She pulled back, searching my face. Are you okay? Did someone hurt you? No, not yet. But someone might. And they might hurt you too because of me. Sophie's eyes widened. And I saw the moment she understood that this wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreaction. This was real. Because of him? She looked past me to where Marco stood near the door, watching us with an unreadable expression. Who is he? Someone who's trying to help? He looks like someone who kills people for a living. Sophie, I'm not stupid, Clara. I watch the news. I know what men in expensive suits and Italian restaurants mean. She lowered her voice. Is he the reason you disappeared? Is he why you never come home? No, I said firmly. He's the reason you're still alive. Marco stepped forward, then, moving with that careful grace that marked him as someone used to being the most dangerous person in any room. Miss Silva, he said quietly, my name is Marco Vitelli. Your sister saved my life, which made her a target for people who want me dead. Those people have now made you a target too. I'm sorry for that. But I can protect you both if you let me. Sophie looked between us, and I could see her mind working, calculating, trying to understand a situation that made no sense in the normal world she inhabited. For how long? She asked. I don't know. That's not good enough. It's honest. They stared at each other, and I saw something pass between them. Recognition, maybe. Sophie had always been good at reading people, at seeing through bullshit. It's what made her a good waitress, able to anticipate what customers needed before they asked. Okay, she said finally. But I have conditions. Marco's eyebrows rose slightly. Go on. I need to call my boss. Tell him I'm taking emergency leave. I need my things from my apartment. And I need Clara to explain what the hell is actually happening, without any Mafia movie nonsense. Done, Marco said. We'll send someone to your apartment. You can call your boss from a secure phone, and your sister will tell you everything. He looked at me. Won't you? I nodded, even though I wanted to protect her from the truth, even though telling her meant admitting how spectacularly I'd failed at keeping her safe from my choices. Marco gestured to one of his men. Tony, take Miss Silva to get what she needs. Use the secure line for her call. After Sophie left with Tony, Marco and I stood in the empty restaurant, surrounded by the ghosts of meals and celebrations that would never happen here again. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. We still don't know who's orchestrating this. You have suspicions. It wasn't a question. I could see it in the way he moved, in the tightness around his eyes. The Calabrese family doesn't operate like this. They're brutal, but they're direct. This, he gestured vaguely, this is psychological, strategic. Someone wants you afraid, wants you to understand that nowhere is safe. That's not how street enforcers work. Then who? Someone with resources. Someone patient. Someone who knows how I think. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then showed me the screen. It was a photograph from a society page, a charity gala, beautiful people in expensive clothes, champagne and false smiles. Marco stood in the background, and in the foreground, shaking hands with a city councilman, was a man I recognized, handsome, polished, smiling like he owned the world. David Hartman, my ex-fiancé. The man I'd run from 5 years ago. The man who'd put me in the hospital and then sent roses to my room with a card that read, I'm sorry you fell. My vision narrowed. The room spun. Clara? Marco's hand was on my arm, steadying me. You know him. That's David, I whispered. We were engaged. I watched understanding dawn on Marco's face, followed quickly by cold, calculating fury. Tell me, he said quietly. Tell me everything. So I did. Standing in that gutted restaurant, I told him about David Hartman, old Boston money, political connections, a man who collected beautiful things and destroyed them slowly when they tried to leave. I told him about the first time he hit me, how he apologized with diamonds. About the second time, when he said it was my fault for embarrassing him at a dinner party. About the restraining order that meant nothing when your family owns judges. I changed my name. I said, went back to my mother's maiden name, moved to a different hospital, cut all ties. I thought I'd buried myself deep enough that he'd never find me. But he did. I nodded. Except it's worse than that, isn't it? He didn't just find me. He used me. That night in the ER, when you walked in bleeding, that wasn't random. Marco's expression confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect. David and my family have history, he said. Business disagreements. Territory disputes. His father wants to expand into operations I control. I've been blocking them for 2 years. He looked at me. Using you to get to me? That's personal. That's revenge. I left the door open, I said, my voice breaking. I made myself vulnerable when I treated you. I gave him exactly what he needed. No. Marco stepped closer, and his voice was firm. He made you vulnerable long before that night. You were just trying to survive, just trying to help someone who was bleeding. That's not weakness, Clara. That's humanity. The kindness in his words was unbearable. I didn't want his empathy. Didn't want to feel this connection to a man whose world was built on the same violence that had nearly destroyed me. But I did feel it, and that terrified me more than any threat. Sophie returned then, carrying a small bag and wearing the expression of someone who just had their reality fundamentally altered. Tony handed Marco a phone. Boss, you need to see this. Marco took the phone, watched something, and his face went very still. Then he handed it to me. It was a video. Sophie E., walking to her car this morning. And David's voice, smooth and cultured, narrating like he was describing a nature documentary. She looks just like you did at that age, Clara. Sweet, breakable. Tell Vitelli that some debts require blood. You have 24 hours to decide who's... The video ended. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. Sophie looked between us, her face pale. That's him? That's the ex you never talk about? I nodded, unable to speak. And he wants to kill us because you helped this guy. She pointed at Marco. Yes? Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and said, So what do we do? Marco smiled then, a dangerous smile that promised violence and protection in equal measure. We go to war. The war room was Marco's penthouse, all glass and steel, and the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Sophie sat on the leather sofa, still processing, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. I stood at the window, watching dawn break over Boston, thinking about how quickly a life could fracture. Behind me, Marco was on his third phone call in 20 minutes, his voice low and controlled, issuing orders in a language that sounded like violence wrapped in silk. When he finally hung up, the silence felt heavier than the conversations had been. Here's what we know, he said, spreading photographs across the table. David's been planning this for months, maybe longer. The stabbing wasn't random, it was theater. He paid Luca Rossi to make it look authentic, sent me to your ER specifically, and waited to see what you'd do. I played right into it, I said quietly. You did what any good doctor would do. That's not weakness, Clara. That's who you are. Sophie looked up then, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. So what's his endgame? Why go through all this just to threaten us? Marco's expression darkened. Control. He wants me compromised, distracted by protecting you, vulnerable because I owe you a debt. And he wants Clara back under his thumb, terrified enough to do whatever he says. The words settled like ice in my chest. Back under his thumb. I'd spent 5 years building walls, creating distance, becoming someone David couldn't touch. And in one night of compassion, I'd given him a key to every door. That's not happening, I said, turning from the window. I'm not going back to being that person, the one who apologized for his violence, who believed him when he said it was love. Good, Marco said simply, because that's not the plan. What is the plan? Sophie asked. Marco looked at both of us, and I saw something shift in his expression, a kind of careful honesty, like he was deciding how much truth we could handle. David thinks he's playing chess, moving pieces, creating situations where I have to react instead of act. But he made a mistake. What mistake? I asked. He gave me something to protect, and I'm very good at protection. The way he said it, not a boast, just a statement of fact, sent a shiver through me that wasn't entirely fear. So we stay here? Sophie's voice was small. Hidden? No, Marco said. Hiding is playing his game. We change the rules. He walked to the table, picked up a photograph of David at some charity event, all polished charm and dangerous smile. David's power comes from two things: his family's connections and his ability to stay clean. No arrests, no scandals, nothing that ties him directly to violence. He operates through proxies, through money, through influence. To beat him, we have to expose him. How? I asked. By making him come after me directly. No proxies, no subtlety, just him, angry enough to make mistakes. Sophie stood up, her voice sharp. You want to use my sister as bait? No, Marco said firmly. I want to use myself as bait. Clara just has to trust me enough to let me. Our eyes met across the room, and I felt the weight of that word, trust. I'd trusted David once, and it had nearly destroyed me. I'd trusted my own judgment, and it had led me here, to a mobster's penthouse at dawn, planning a war I never asked to fight. But Marco had been honest. Brutally, uncomfortably honest about who he was and what he could offer. No pretty lies, no promises he couldn't keep. Tell me the rules, I said quietly. What? You said protection means following rules, so tell me yours. Something flickered in Marco's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Rule 1. You don't leave without security. I know it feels like prison, but it's survival. Rule 2. You tell me everything. Where you go, who you see, what feels wrong. No secrets, even small ones. Rule 3. You trust that I'm keeping you alive. Even when you don't understand my decisions, even when it feels wrong, you trust that I have reasons. The rules hung in the air between us. Absolute, inflexible, suffocating. My turn, I said. Marco's eyebrows rose slightly. I have one rule. Just one. You don't lie to me. Not about the danger, not about who you are, not about what this costs. If I'm in this war, I'm in it with open eyes. No protecting me from the truth because you think I'm too fragile to handle it. I stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to smell his cologne and the faint scent of gun oil that seemed to follow him everywhere. I've been lied to by men who claimed to love me. Been told my reality wasn't real, that my fear was overreaction, that violence was care. So if you want my trust, Marco Vitelli, you earn it by never, ever treating me like I'm too weak to know the truth. The silence stretched. Sophie watched us from the sofa, her expression unreadable. Finally, Marco extended his hand. Deal, he said quietly. When I shook his hand, his grip was firm and warm, and I felt something shift between us. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people who'd survived by learning when to fight and when to yield, now choosing to stand together. What about me? Sophie's voice cut through the moment. Do I get rules too? Marco released my hand and turned to her. You get a choice. You can stay here, protected, until this is over. Or you can go back to Providence with a security detail and try to live normally while we handle David. Some choice, Sophie muttered. It's more than most people get. She looked at me then, and I saw the little girl she'd been, 10 years old, holding my hand at our mother's funeral, asking when things would go back to normal. I'm staying, she said. I'm not leaving Clara alone with you. Sophie, you don't have to. I started. Yes, I do. Because you've been protecting me my whole life, and maybe it's time I returned the favor. My throat tightened. When had my baby sister become this brave? Marco nodded once. Okay. Then we do this together. That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep in the guest room and the city had gone quiet below us, I found Marco standing at the windows again, looking out at his kingdom. Can't sleep? I asked. Occupational hazard. I moved to stand beside him. Both of us reflected in the glass, ghosts superimposed over the city lights. Tell me something true, I said. Something you wouldn't tell most people. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I'm afraid of becoming my father. He was a good man who did terrible things because he thought he had no choice. And every day I make choices that sound exactly like his reasons. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. I'm afraid I'll never stop running, I said quietly. That no matter how far I go or how much I change, David will always find me. That I'll always be the girl who stayed too long and left too late. You're not that girl anymore. How do you know? He turned to face me then, and his expression was gentle in a way I hadn't seen before. Because that girl wouldn't have demanded honesty from a man like me, wouldn't have made rules instead of accepting them. You survived him, Clara, and survival changes people. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that I'd become someone strong enough to face the monster from my past without crumbling, but I was so tired of being afraid. What happens tomorrow? I asked. Tomorrow, we start making David nervous, making him think we're vulnerable, exposed. And when he comes for us, because he will come, we'll be ready. And if we're not, Marco's smile was dark and certain. Then we improvise. I should have been terrified, should have been planning my escape, my next disappearance. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe broken things could be dangerous too. I hadn't said David's name aloud in 5 years. Not to therapists, not to Sophie, not even to myself in the mirror when the nightmares woke me at 3 a.m. His name was a wound I'd cauterized, sealed over with scar tissue and distance, and the lie that forgetting was the same as healing. But Marco needed to know. If we were going to survive this, he needed to understand exactly what we were fighting. So I told him. We sat in his kitchen at dawn, coffee growing cold between us, and I excavated the past I'd buried. Sophie was still asleep down the hall, and the city was quiet enough that my voice felt too loud, each word landing like a stone in still water. I met David at a hospital fundraiser, I began. I was 22, just starting my residency. He was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, educated, from a family that actually sat down to dinner together. I'd grown up with chaos and violence and a mother who loved vodka more than her daughters. David seemed like proof that I'd made it out, that I'd become someone different. Marco listened without interrupting, his dark eyes steady on mine. The first 6 months were perfect. He sent flowers to the hospital, took me to restaurants I couldn't pronounce, introduced me to his family like I was something precious he'd discovered. His mother loved me, said I was refreshingly authentic compared to the other women he'd dated. I wrapped my hands around the cold mug, needing something to hold. The first time he hit me was 3 weeks after he proposed. We were at his parents' house for dinner, and I laughed at something his brother said. Just laughed. David waited until we got home, then slammed me against the wall and told me I'd embarrassed him. Made him look weak in front of his family. The memory crystallized. The shock of impact. The way his face had transformed from the man I loved into something unrecognizable. The taste of blood in my mouth. He cried afterward. Bought me a diamond bracelet. Said he'd been drinking too much. That work was stressful. That he loved me so much it made him crazy. I believed him. Or I wanted to believe him. I don't know which is worse. Clara, Marco started, but I shook my head. Let me finish. I need to say it all at once or I won't be able to say it at all. He nodded, and I continued. It happened again 2 months later, then a month after that. Each time there was a reason. I'd worked a late shift. I'd worn the wrong dress. I'd looked at another man. Each time he apologized with gifts and promises. And each time I told myself it would be the last time. I looked down at my hands, at the faint scar on my left wrist from where I'd fallen during one of David's episodes. The night I finally left, we were at his apartment. I'd told him I wanted to postpone the wedding. Just postpone it, not cancel. He broke 3 of my ribs and fractured my cheekbone. Told me I was nothing without him. That no one would believe me if I went to the police because everyone knew I was clumsy, unstable, probably drinking too much like my mother. Marco's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. I ended up in the ER where I was doing my residency. Told everyone I'd fallen downstairs. The attending physician didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she didn't push. Just treated me and sent me home with pamphlets about domestic violence that I threw away in the parking lot. That night, while David was at work, I packed 1 bag, changed my name back to Silva, my mother's maiden name, withdrew everything from our joint account, and I disappeared. Started over in Boston where nobody knew me, where I could be just another overworked resident trying to save lives. The confession left me feeling hollow and relieved simultaneously, like lancing an infection. I thought I was safe, I whispered. I thought if I buried myself deep enough, changed everything about my life, he'd never find me. But he did. And he's been watching, waiting, planning this whole thing, using my compassion against me. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Not romantic, not possessive, just human connection. He didn't use your compassion against you, Clara. He tried to weaponize it. There's a difference. Compassion isn't weakness. It's what makes you stronger than men like him will ever understand. I left the door open. I said, my voice breaking, if I hadn't treated you that night, then I would have died in an alley, and David would have found some other way to hurt you. This isn't your fault. None of it was ever your fault. The kindness in his voice undid something in me. I'd spent 5 years believing that if I'd just been smarter, stronger, less naive, I could have prevented it all. That survival meant accepting responsibility for other people's violence. What he did to you, Marco continued, his voice low and fierce, that's on him. Every bruise, every lie, every moment you spent afraid, that's his debt, not yours. And I promise you, Clara, he will pay it. I looked up at him then, at this dangerous man who killed without hesitation, but spoke about my pain like it mattered. And I felt something shift inside me. Not love, not yet, but recognition. He understood what it meant to survive by becoming someone else. To carry violence in your history and still choose to be human. There's something else, I said quietly. Something I need you to know. Tell me. When I left David, I was pregnant. Marco went very still. I lost the baby a week later. Miscarriage, the doctor said, probably caused by the trauma. But sometimes I wonder if my body knew that bringing a child into that world, tied to that man forever, would be a different kind of violence. The words hung in the air between us. The secret I'd never told anyone, not even Sophie. I'm sorry, Marco said simply. And somehow those 2 words meant more than any elaborate comfort could have. We sat in silence as the sun rose higher. 2 people bound by violence and survival and the strange intimacy of shared secrets. Finally, Marco's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his expression hardened. It's from David, he said, turning it toward me. A video. Surveillance footage from yesterday. Marco and me leaving my apartment building, driving to the safe house, arriving at the restaurant where we'd found Sophie. Every movement documented, every location compromised. And below it, a message. I've been watching you watching her. Romantic, Vitelli, predictable, midnight, the old church on Hanover Street. She comes alone, or I start sending pieces of her sister to her new boyfriend. DeMarco read it twice, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. You're not going, he said flatly. Yes, I replied, my voice steady despite the fear. I am. If you go alone, you die, Marco said, his voice flat and absolute. If I don't go, Sophie dies. We stood on opposite sides of his kitchen island, 2 wills colliding in the gray light of morning. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the chess player evaluating moves, counting costs, weighing which pieces he could afford to sacrifice. Except I wasn't a piece. Not anymore. There's another way, he said finally. What way? We don't go alone, but we go smart. What happened next was a masterclass in controlled power. Marco made 6 phone calls, each one brief and precise. Within an hour, information materialized like dark magic. David's schedule, his security detail, his mistress's address, financial records that painted a picture of a man who believed himself untouchable. You don't win wars with bullets, Marco explained as we drove toward Hanover Street. You win them with leverage. David thinks he's playing chess, moving us around his board. But he's playing checkers in a game where the rules just changed. The old church rose against the night sky, gothic and abandoned, its stained glass windows dark like dead eyes. Marco's hand found mine briefly before I opened the car door. Remember, he said quietly, you're not alone in there. Even when it feels like you are. I walked through those heavy doors and found David waiting in the center aisle, surrounded by candles that cast dancing shadows across his handsome face. He looked exactly as I remembered, polished, confident, wearing his cruelty like an expensive suit. Clara, he said warmly, as if we were old friends meeting for coffee. You look well. Life with criminals suits you. Where's Sophie? Safe. For now. He circled me slowly, and I felt 22 again, trapped in his apartment, watching him transform from charming to monstrous in the space between heartbeats. You always were too compassionate for your own good. Treating wounded strangers in the middle of the night. I knew you'd do it. Knew you couldn't help yourself. You stabbed him, I said, the realization crystallizing. You stabbed Marco just to send him to my ER. David's smile widened with genuine pleasure. Hired someone to, yes, $50,000 and 2 months of planning. But seeing you now, seeing how perfectly it worked, worth every penny. Behind me, the church doors opened with a sound like thunder. Marco walked in flanked by men in federal badges, their guns drawn and expressions carved from stone. But more devastating than the weapons were the cameras, news crews flooding through side entrances, their lights transforming the gothic darkness into harsh, unforgiving clarity. David's confidence fractured, just for a second, but I saw it. The flash of panic, the recognition that he'd miscalculated catastrophically. David Hartman. The lead agent's voice echoed through the space. You're under arrest for extortion, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering, and about 15 other charges we've been building for the past 3 hours. Marco had done it. Not with violence, but with something far more dangerous. The truth, broadcast to every news station in Boston, documented and undeniable. As agents moved forward to cuff him, David turned back to me with pure hatred burning in his eyes. You think he's your hero, Clara? Ask him about the Riverside fire. Ask him about the 12 people who died because Marco Vitelli wanted to send a message. Ask him who the real monster is. The words hit like a physical blow. Marco's face was unreadable, carved from marble. We should go, he said quietly. But I stood frozen, because David's final act of cruelty was the most effective. Planting doubt, poisoning the only alliance I had left. 12 people. A fire. Marco's name attached to mass murder. Is it true? I whispered as we walked to the car, leaving the circus of arrests and cameras behind. Marco didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. Get in the car, Clara. I'll tell you everything, but not here, not like this. And as we drove away from the church, from David's arrest, from what should have been victory, all I could think was, what if I'd traded one monster for another? What if Marco's protection was just another kind of prison? His honesty just a more sophisticated form of David's lies? The man beside me had just destroyed my abuser with brutal efficiency, had commanded federal agents like pieces on his personal chessboard, had turned David's trap into a public execution. Who exactly had I trusted with my life? And more terrifying, who had I begun to trust with my heart? I didn't go home with Marco that night. Instead, I asked his driver to take me to the hospital, my hospital, where everything had started, where I still understood the rules. Marco didn't argue, just watched me through the car window with an expression I couldn't read and let me go. The night shift was ending when I arrived. I logged into the records database with shaking hands and searched Riverside fire, Boston, 12 dead, 3 years ago, arson suspected but never proven. The building had housed witnesses in a racketeering case, witnesses who were set to testify against Marco's organization. If they'd lived, he'd be in prison. Instead, they'd burned. I read article after article, each one more damning than the last. Anonymous sources claiming Marco had ordered it. Investigators frustrated by evidence that disappeared. Families demanding justice that never came. My phone buzzed. Marco, you're looking into Riverside. Good. You deserve the truth. Another text. Detective Sarah Chen worked the case. She lives in Dorchester. She'll tell you what the newspapers won't. He was giving me permission to investigate him, encouraging it, even. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified me more. What kind of man weaponized transparency? I found Detective Chen's address in the system. Drove there as the sun rose, exhaustion making everything feel surreal and liquid. She answered her door in pajamas, unsurprised, like she'd been expecting me. Dr. Silva, she said quietly. I wondered when you'd come. Her apartment was small and cluttered with case files, the home of someone who'd never learned to stop working. She poured coffee I didn't drink and told me everything. Vitelli didn't order that fire, she said, her voice heavy with 3 years of frustration. David Hartman did. He was trying to frame Marco, eliminate competition, and gain control of territory. I had proof, surveillance footage, financial records, witness statements, but when I tried to bring charges, my evidence disappeared. Hartman's father is a federal judge. The case was closed before it really opened. The words rearranged everything I thought I understood. You're telling me David killed 12 people and blamed Marco. I'm telling you David Hartman is a monster who hides behind legitimacy, while men like Vitelli, who are guilty of plenty, get blamed for his crimes. Chen looked at me with tired eyes. You want the truth about Marco? He's a criminal. He breaks laws, hurts people, profits from suffering, but he didn't burn those witnesses alive. Your ex-fiancée did. I left her apartment as full daylight broke over the city, my entire understanding of good and evil shattered and reformed. Marco was dangerous, I'd never doubted that. But David was something worse. A monster in a suit, wielding law and privilege like weapons. When I finally returned to Marco's penthouse, the sun was high and merciless. I found the door hanging open, torn from its hinges. Inside was chaos. Furniture overturned, glass shattered, blood streaked across the marble floor. Sophie was gone. Marco was gone. On the counter, written in what I prayed wasn't blood, was a message. The fire should have killed you 3 years ago, Vitelli. This time I finished the job. She can watch. D below it, coordinates to a location outside the city. And a time. 1 hour. David had escaped. Somehow, impossibly, he'd escaped federal custody and taken everything that mattered. I didn't call the police. Didn't call Marco's people. I'd spent my whole life being rescued. First from poverty, then from David, then from my own choices. Standing in that destroyed penthouse, I made a different choice. I grabbed Marco's spare gun from the safe he'd shown me, got in my car, and drove toward the coordinates alone. This time, I would do the rescuing. The warehouse district was exactly what I expected: industrial decay and deliberate isolation, the kind of place where screams dissolve into rusted metal and forgotten machinery. David's car sat outside like a promise of violence, flanked by 2 others I didn't recognize. I should have been terrified. Should have been shaking so hard I couldn't hold the gun Marco had taught me to fire during one of his security briefings. Instead, I felt something else. Something cold and certain and mine. Clarity. For 5 years I'd run from David's shadow, built walls, changed names, erased myself piece by piece until I was unrecognizable even to my own sister. I'd confused disappearing with healing, silence with strength. But standing outside that warehouse, I finally understood. Survival wasn't about becoming invisible. It was about becoming inevitable. I didn't burst through the door. Instead, I called Detective Chen, gave her the location, the evidence Marco had compiled, everything. Then I called 3 news stations, the same ones that had broadcast David's arrest, told them there was a breaking story about a judge's son, escaped custody, and multiple hostages. I was turning David's private execution into a public spectacle, using his own tactics against him. Only then did I walk through that door. The warehouse was vast and empty, our voices echoing off concrete and iron. Marco was chained to a support beam, bloodied but alive, his dark eyes widening when he saw me. Sophie sat bound beside him, her face tear-streaked but furious. David stood in the center of it all, genuinely surprised. Clara, I told you to stay away. You've told me a lot of things, David. That you loved me, that the bruises were my fault, that I was nothing without you. I kept the gun pointed at the ground but visible. You know what I finally figured out? You're a liar. About everything. His face twisted with that familiar rage, the mask slipping. I made you, gave you everything. Education, connections, a future. And you threw it away for what? To nurse criminals? No, I said, my voice steady. I threw it away to be free. Something you'll never understand because you've never let anyone close enough to actually see you. Behind me, sirens wailed. David's eyes widened as police cars surrounded the building, as news vans pulled up with their hungry lights. You can't prove anything, he hissed. Marco, bloodied and chained, started laughing. She doesn't have to. You confessed? On camera. He nodded toward a corner where a small red light blinked. Recording. Because men like Marco document everything. The police arrested David on 17 charges. This time his father's connections couldn't save him. Not with video evidence, not with Detective Chen's testimony, not with the media circus I'd orchestrated. 3 months later, I was closing up the ER when I saw Marco through the window. No longer bleeding, no longer desperate, just a man choosing vulnerability. "Coffee?" he asked when I stepped outside. "Is it really a question this time?" "Not a command. It's a question." We walked to a late-night diner, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who'd seen everything. Ordered coffee we didn't drink and sat in comfortable silence until he finally spoke. "You saved my life twice," he said. "Once in the ER. Once in that warehouse when you could have let David finish what he started. You saved mine too." From David. From thinking I had to stay small to stay safe. "So what now?" he asked. I looked at this dangerous man who'd been honest when honesty cost him, who'd given me weapons and agency instead of just protection, who'd understood that sometimes the bravest thing is letting someone see your scars. "Now we figure out who we are when we're not just surviving," I said. "No debts, no obligations, just two people who choose each other." "I can do that. Can you? Because I need you to understand something, Marco. I'm not going back to being someone's possession. Not yours, not anyone's. If we do this, we do it as equals." He reached across the table, and this time when he took my hand, it felt different. Not protection or debt or rescue, just connection. "I don't want to own you, Clara. I want to know you. The real you, not the survivor, not the doctor, not the woman running from her past. Just you." Outside, the city hummed with late-night energy. Inside, something new was beginning. Fragile and uncertain and real. I wasn't healed. Trauma doesn't work that way. But I was choosing to be seen, choosing to risk, choosing to believe that broken things could still be dangerous and beautiful and worth fighting for. Sophie was in therapy, rebuilding her own life. David was awaiting trial. Marco was still Marco, complicated and criminal and trying to be better. And me? I was learning that the bravest thing I'd ever done wasn't treating a wounded stranger or facing down my abuser. It was choosing, again and again, to show up as myself. Flawed and fierce and free. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. And click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.